So I was applying all this stuff for other people. And Mrs. Black said, why don't you do it yourself? After leaving that company, I was there 4 years, worked in 3 different territories for them. I was back in my hometown of Phoenix, Arizona, where I have a better network. And I missed it. I missed working in teaching, adult teaching. That conversation that all of us who have, a normal, healthy psychology would have is running in my head like, oh boy, how do I make this work? I'm feeling intimidated. I tried to figure out how to get in and couldn't. And he said, well, I know a guy in Shanghai. He owns this big leadership development firm, and we were off to the races. My role in the family means that I can't be a gambler. I have to be willing to take risks in order to be successful, but I can't be, a no holds barred gambler. That company keeps saying nice things about me. It's like kind of beyond what I ever expected. But yeah, it went well.
Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome to the Solo Sauce podcast. My name is Joeri, and on this show, I have honest conversations with people who work for themselves, sharing stories, sharing insights, maybe even some practical ideas that you can take forward on your solo journey. On today's episode, I'm joined by True Black, who's an executive coach and facilitator out of Taipei. In this conversation, we get into that moment where his wife nudged him to go out on his own. We talk about being and staying humble and about finding trading Zen. I'll give you some thoughts, maybe a question at the end of this episode, but for now, enjoy my conversation with True Black.
Did you always want to be a coach and a facilitator? If we go back a bit, what's your journey been to get you to where we are now?
Yeah, coaching and training. I didn't even really know that these fields existed when I was in my corporate leadership phase of career. I got a degree in Chinese literature and language, with a minor in Asian history, and I knew I wanted to do some sort of. I wanted to work in Taiwan, China, the Chinese diaspora somewhere. Maybe, the more the better. The more places, the better. And didn't know how to do it, but I followed that interest. I got an MBA from Thunderbird, which is it's a graduate school of international management that's now part of Arizona State University. And I had this corporate career, basically in territory management, regional leadership, that kind of thing. Lots of sales and marketing with some operational management involved. The way I paid my way through graduate school was to tutor adults who were going to take, these important tests in the United States. The MCAT for medical school, the GRE for graduate school, the GMAT for MBA, the LSAT. I taught all of these, and I really enjoyed working with adults in a, we need to learn and have, we understand the right methodologies so that we can do well on the test. And I love that. And in fact, my first job out of MBA was running a region for one of these companies that did that test preparation service. So I knew that I loved teaching and I loved working with adults, but I had no idea that we had something called corporate training, because even though the first company I worked for was a large corporation, there was no, training was sort of, onboarding, how to use the systems and how to file your financial reports on time and not screw things up kind of training. There was no leadership training. There was no presentation skills training, nothing like that. After leaving that company, I was there 4 years, worked in 3 different territories for them. I was back in my hometown of Phoenix, Arizona, where I have a better network. And I missed it. I missed working in teaching, adult teaching.
Oh, hey, if you are enjoying this episode, make sure that you leave a like or leave a comment or share this episode with somebody who needs to hear this or needs to see it if you're watching this on YouTube. All right, let's get back to the conversation.
And so I was able, through my network, to get a job working at a community college in the extension. So it was evenings and weekends. And I was working with working adults, people from 23 to, 50 years old. I loved it. And, when you do that, the curriculum and then the way that you do your teaching is in your hands. And what I was doing is I was naturally attracted by what I later figured out were effective adult learning methodologies and, effective facilitation techniques. So I was not the kind of teacher who would lecture a lot. I would bring up I'd bring some content that might be useful, and then I would want to personalize that and let them get their hands in it and talk through it and bring in experiential learning and this kind of stuff. I was doing that before I even knew that you could do that as a corporate trainer. Eventually got into doing some basic communication, influence, negotiation, presentation skills types of trainings here in Taiwan, in large corporations, Microsoft and tons of them, every kind of insurance company, pharma company, financial bank, that sort of thing. I was fluent in Chinese, so they wanted me to do a lot of this in Mandarin. Yeah, and then one day somebody at Microsoft said, one of the guys I was actually coaching him one-on-one, and I was supposed to coach him with his global communication skills, which basically means English. I was supposed to help him figure out how to give a good presentation to his Singaporean boss who couldn't speak Chinese. He said, you shouldn't be doing this sort of language and communication oriented stuff. You have this background. You should be doing leadership training. And I said, I'd love to. I've been trying to get into that for years. I don't know, it was 2 or 3 years where I'd tried to figure out how to get in and couldn't. And he said, well, I know a guy in Shanghai. He owns this big leadership development firm, and we were off to the races. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's what got me into it. And then there are sort of phases in a trainer's career. I've written about it in a book that I'll publish early next year.
Working through others for so many years, at some point, 2013, you set up your own thing. You said, look, I'm just going to launch True Development, which is your own business. How did you make that switch? How do you get from working from A and then doing your own thing?
For me, we all sort of polish and the stories of our lives a little bit, but the way I remember it is we've lived in a place called Danshui, outside of Taipei City. It's near there's a river, Danshui River, and then near the ocean. We've lived here for a long time, for about 20 years. And I take the light rail, we call it the MRT here in Taiwan, and I would pass by this giant office building that was really nicely designed and good rare in parts of Taiwan, great architecture. And I always think to myself, wouldn't it be wonderful to have an office in a building like that and to have our own company? Wouldn't that be fantastic? But I was a freelance trainer flying all over Asia and sometimes Europe and Australia or the US, plying my trade. Well, at some point, my wife, who is a plain spoken person, it's one of the reasons I was attracted to her and married her, is that she tells the truth as she sees it. So a Dutch Taiwanese,
quite direct.
Yeah, just very candid. And she said, honey, you are every time you get one of these programs that's designed at headquarters, these 2-day workshop and whatever skills we're talking about, you will improve that. You'll revise it and improve it. You have to kind of keep if you're delivering something that falls into it comes to you, you're expected to deliver what's there, but also the training companies and the clients, they want it to work for the people in the room. So I was doing things that I felt were right with that material. So I would push really hard to meet some of the people I was going to be working with in advance, and interview them a little bit and find out what their life was like, especially related to that topic. So if we're talking about, coaching skills, for example, I would want to know how much coaching they've experienced and what they've learned about coaching and how they feel about coaching, honestly, in their hearts. And sometimes I could do that, sometimes I couldn't. But eventually I had enough experience that I could sort of guess how well this stuff was going to land. And I was retooling it quite a bit, keeping the bones, keeping all the focus there, but I was redoing it basically and adding a lot of I was humanizing it. So I was applying all this stuff for other people. And Mrs. Black said, why don't you do it yourself? And she's a practical lady. So she also said, you're not getting paid to fix these programs for them. Why not get the clients to pay you for that? For the design, the content, and then the whole the facilitation that you do. I said, really? She said, yeah. So my wife moves quickly. 2 months later, we had, it wasn't in that big, beautiful building, but we had an office nearby, small. We started small, fairly conservative, many mouths to feed. Yeah. We started with just the office. I had my office. She had her office. She hired me an assistant. And then about 7 or 8 months into it, we started to get a little bit of traction, and she said, we need to accelerate this. And she hired an account manager. And so we had this team of 4. Within about 2 years, we had 6 people working in that office. And then she wanted to expand to a bigger space and customize it. We ended up in that beautiful building that I wanted to be in.
Nice. So you did get to at the end, small steps.
It was basically my wife saying, I know that you work so hard, you take on all this work for the family. I know you want to do this. Let's do it ourselves.
Wonderful of her to push you a bit like that as well and challenge your thinking, because it clearly changed the trajectory of what you were doing. And the funny point that you said, you're doing this for clients, but why don't you do it for yourself? Why don't you build for yourself? Do you remember your first paying client?
Well, you can't poach clients from those that you do work for. At least I can't. My DNA, my makeup does not allow me to be unethical like that. So, and I also think it destroys a trainer's reputation. So for a while, I was continuing to work under the auspices of my training company partners. There were several that I did work for in different specialties. And I had a business card for each one of them and an email account with each one of them. And I would never mention my own brand. People would even say, do you have your own, company? And I would say, yeah, but the relationship is with my partner here, and we're going to, we have to keep doing that. Our account manager that we hired got us enough meetings that we eventually ended up working for a company called Qualcomm. I did a number of programs for Qualcomm, and I had never met any of those people through any of my other relationships. So it was kosher. It was a fair game. And from there, I think we must have said something like, if you have friends in HR associations, we'd be happy to go speak. First couple of years, I did a lot of speaking to HR associations because I needed to develop those direct relationships. I'd go talk about innovation, was one of my specialties. So I was just getting out in the community, meeting people, getting a mailing list together. I've written this newsletter called True Insights from really the first month. I think I sent it to 5 people the first month, and now, it's a few thousand. Yeah.
You talked about a person that whenever, I think it was she moves, she brings you into that company. I know from experience that the majority of the work I get now, after having done this for a decade and a half, 2 decades, come from warm leads. Basically, it's usually somebody says, remember when I worked for company X, we did this. Now with company Y, we have a similar problem. Can you come work with us? How is that on your side? And how do you maintain a relationship like that?
I mentioned earlier, it's about being around long enough that, and performing well enough at a certain standard of quality so that people feel impressed. They remember you. I try to be a good partner and a good friend to people in the industry who I work with. When they leave a job and they don't have a new one worked out, I make myself available to give recommendations to, it's perfectly ethical to say, you might want to check out these organizations because they have the kind of learning and development team that you might be interested in. And, I introduce them to people. I just try to be of service to people. I guess that's a product of who I am, but it brings tangible results as well.
I love that. It's just such an underestimated thing. I told somebody the other day that I hate it when people who never engage with me, never reach out, all of a sudden They show up and say, "Hey, buddy, we should meet for a coffee." Clearly, with an agenda behind it, right? They want either some work, they want a reference or a referral. I mean, and even though I understand why they're doing that, super transactional, I'm much more like you, where you just keep in touch with people, even if there's no agenda, even if I need nothing from you, just get into the habit of keeping in touch. Those things always come back. If you're good to people around you, you're going to get some of the goodness back. I don't believe in karma. Whatever you believe in is up to you. But I do believe that very often you can get that back. And just being kind to people and just, I like that you're saying like, I'm just here to help. I'm just here to help you get further. That alone as a mindset will get you so much further, particularly when you work for yourself, because you can't do it all by yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I've always told anyone that we've hired that we serve a number of different clients. I tell them what I mean by serve. So the way that you truly serve your HR partners, and these are the people in my field who bring you in and very often have a lot of power to influence the decision about using you or not, or another vendor. The way to make them successful, to support their success, is to deliver on your promise of a fantastic learning experience for the people in the workshop, or a successful coaching program for the leaders that you're coaching, or a team strategy meeting that brings results that they've never had before. You have to deliver on all those promises. And when you really take care of the people in the room, and you put lots and lots of care and into that, you're making your buyer successful. And then the other thing I say is, just remember that everyone in that room and everyone who says yes or no to us on the HR or the business leadership side, they're all human beings. There's somebody's son or daughter. There's somebody's mom or dad. There's somebody's brother or sister. They're just as human as you are. So what you need to do is serve the human, and that means you serve them in every way that you're able to. That's reasonable, that doesn't get in their way. and I've always felt really strongly about that and preached that, and I think it's been a secret to our longevity.
It makes sense, though. Being likable helps. Being good at your job, because you have to be good at your job, even if you're great at keeping in touch with people. At the end of the day, your most fundamental thing is, can you do the job? But then the rest comes from showing up, giving your full self, being creative, being there for people when they need it, even if there's not always a really direct need. I need to rely on that network, whether that's peers, people who challenge me, clients, people who can introduce me to clients.
Yeah. So if you give me a choice between writing a daily LinkedIn epistle, or producing all kinds of marketing collateral, or just spending that time writing a thank you card to one person who I appreciate. I'm a big, book buyer and giver. So sending them some kind of resource that might be useful to them, introducing them to somebody that they wanted to meet. I mean, I'll have lots of clients who will say, "True, what do you know about this training workshop?" And it's not my workshop. What options are out there for this particular area? I'll go research that, or I'll use my network and what I know, and I'll just help them find the answers to that, even though I might not get, I'm not getting a job.
So, when people say that cliche, your network is your net worth, it's kind of true. Yeah. And I think the longer you're around, the longer you do this, you realize that you need to build on that, whether it is loose connections, people you've worked with in the past, people who are movers and shakers, who might not be your clients, but can just make stuff happen. It is so underestimated. Get into the habit of just staying in touch with people and seeing where you can help and serve.
It all goes back to my decision to see them as human beings, not positions. And I can give you a kind of a fun example, or for me anyway, it was a really impactful example that I've been sharing quite a bit. About something like a year and a half ago, I go to Singapore to deliver this 3-day senior leadership workshop. It's a very culturally diverse group of really talented, super successful, likely very wealthy people because of the nature of their business. So we've got, 4 or 5 presidents from different parts of the business. We have the regional CEO opening the session. Those presidents are there sort of the whole time. They're both learning and facilitating group projects and things. Somebody in the room, he's got 600 people that report to him. So, these are movers and shakers in business, and in that industry. They're very important people. And I'm told by the program owners, true, nobody wants to be there. They haven't really had great experiences in the past. They're busy, and they're wondering why does the company want them to spend 2.5 days on this? And I think you'll do well. I hope, basically it was, I hope you don't screw it up. So you can imagine, I'm walking to the venue in the morning, there on the streets of Singapore. That conversation that all of us who have a normal, healthy psychology would have is running in my head, like, oh boy, how do I make this work? I'm feeling intimidated. Well, this thing that I'm talking about, this service orientation and seeing people holistically as whole human beings, and with an emphasis on the human, that saved me. So you're there to serve wonderful human beings, and don't worry about how you perform. Focus on meeting the wonderful people in the room, and look forward to getting to know them and to seeing a little bit into their world. And that's what I did. I just kind of just really enjoyed them, and then brought the best of what I could bring to that learning process. That company keeps saying nice things about me. It's like kind of beyond what I ever expected. But yeah, it went well. Yeah.
So how did you get here? How did you get to be such a man that's booked out 90% of the time?
There is something to being in your profession for a certain amount of time, and I've been doing this 20 years. If you're able to do well with what you do, you build a reputation. Things will happen, like a new client will call and said, well, I found out about you because I belong to an HR association, and I asked them who could do this. And, a couple of people said that I should seek you out. So just longevity is part of it. But I at risk of sounding a little bit proud of myself, it's that you're able to do things at a high quality standard consistently over time, and that has an aggregate effect on new opportunities coming in.
Are you proud of yourself?
Am I proud of myself? I am extremely pleased and great. I would say gratified and appreciative of the work that I've had the chance to do. Sorry, that may sound a little bit fake. I believe in myself, absolutely. You can't. I'm like anyone else. I have conversations in my head that are, those imposter syndrome types of conversations. Everybody, everybody experiences that. But I generally choose to believe in myself. So I do have confidence, but I'm very wary of being overconfident to the point where I think that I'm infallible and that I am God's gift to whatever it is that we're working on. Yeah, that's, I think, dangerous.
I think you can be proud of yourself, at least proud of maybe some achievement, something you put together. It does get to a point where it can become delusional as well, and you can't see your own, I guess maybe you can't see your own flaws anymore. There's a balance in there somewhere.
Well, I've seen it over and over again, Joeri. I wonder, I'm curious what you've seen in the, the ways that you've worked with clients. I've seen it on the, on a large scale with a training company that has something special. They're doing leadership development, or they're doing coaching, or all of the above. And they because they have something valuable and unique, they do well. And in many cases, they will grow very quickly. If they're well funded and they have this growth, they want to grow. They have an intention to grow. They'll go from 5 people to 50, and a small rented office to a building that they've purchased, and they get so proud of what they've done that they kind of lose touch with the things that made them successful in the first place. And I've seen that also with individuals. I often say that hubris is the death knell of a trainer's career, a consultant's career, um, or a training company. There are a number of previously very successful training companies that right now are suffering. They haven't maintained enough organizational humility to 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 really read what's going on, to stay in touch with the clients and to adapt to what they need. Now, I have also seen those organizations that have handled this beautifully.
What got them there won't get them to the next phase, and they hang on to sometimes quite outdated rules of the game, maybe a level of hubris, maybe a level of arrogance, which usually comes to bite them in the ass at some point, and then they need to change. But maybe it's a good thing. Maybe we all do this. I mean, I've been guilty of cruising. I've been guilty of leaning on the same crutches I've been leaning on so many years, and all of a sudden those crutches don't work anymore. And I'm like, oh, maybe I do need to change something. I think we're all a bit guilty of that. At least I definitely am. So it's important to get that mirrored back at you every now and then hopefully be humble enough to make some changes.
You make a very good point. Yeah, it's always tempting especially when you're busy and you're in demand, to sort of recycle the stuff that's worked in the past. And then I think all of us have gotten to a point where we realize that's that's giving us diminishing returns. And yeah, you have to have that. You're right. You have to have that humility to sort of get, hit the wall, feel disappointed in yourself, and then to go back and improve things, create the next version, that sort of thing.
One of the biggest challenges I've had, and I see this around me as well, is for a while I was on top of my game. So I was young, I was working in an innovation agency. I did this in fluent Mandarin, in English and German, different languages. Very sought after in the market at the right time. We're talking so many years ago. And at some point I realized there are better companies out there. Other companies have evolved and I hadn't. I've been using the same approaches and I hadn't challenged myself enough, because why would I? I was so busy doing stuff that I forgot to do that. And I have a feeling a lot of people who become, let's say, start working for themselves, maybe after a certain career, they'll struggle with that. They might, in a business, have been somebody who was somebody, Mrs. Manager or Mr. Supervisor or some big name in the company. And then they start working for themselves without all the resources, without all the money. And they get humbled really quickly. And they realize that was part of them, but you need to reinvent yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. You remind me of something that one of my closest friends shared with me. He bought and sold a couple of websites. He auctioned the websites back. This is 25 years ago, approximately. Back when you could see a website, a domain name, make a bid for it, and you could resell it 3 weeks later for a massive profit. And he was 21 years old. He's younger than me, and he ended up selling 2 websites. Total proceeds was about 1.5 million US. Expanded what he was doing very quickly. Invested in a couple of businesses, hired all kinds of people, got a beautiful office, and outfitted it and all of that. And then 4 or 5 years later was he had to close everything down. It was very discouraging for him. And what he told me was, he said, "True, I feel like getting rich too early is a bad thing. Like when you go from you're bootstrapping everything, you have no real support or no real resources, and you end up making lots of money, and now you have lots of resources, and you can enjoy. What you should do is be a little more conservative about what you do with all of your money, but you get so full of yourself that that's what he did. He sort of blew it. Yeah.
Have you had a moment like that?
Not really. No, I'm very risk tolerant in many ways, but because of my role as a father to many children, Five. We have five. I think, with various other folks that we care for. Just my role in the family means that I can't be a gambler. I have to be willing to take risks in order to be successful, but I can't be, a no holds barred gambler.
Maybe it's a good thing to have something there to not to hold you. I was going to say to hold you back, but that's not the right way of saying it. Something there to keep you from flying off the handle, from making like massive bets that might not be in your favor in the long run. Maybe
To keep you grounded. Yeah.
Yeah. You got 5 kids.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance being busy, being booked out 90% of the time in a nice office, traveling, doing your work with wife and 5 kids? How do you do that?
They are more important than anything that I do, always. And I I stick to that. I feel like, birthing a child, or in my case, adopting a couple of them. We have 5. Um, well, I can share publicly. This is really cool. Of the 5 kids, 3 of them are I'm their birth father. And 2 of them have recently gone to the family court and applied to have me be their legal father of record. Yeah, it's a very meaningful thing. And I've known them since they were pretty young and loved them from day one. And I just think that, when you have a child or when you marry somebody, implicit in that is that they always come first. So yes, I might be very busy. I might be on the road. I might, they just come first, and they know it. And knowing that, I think, is critical for them.
I'm seeing a red thread run through here. You have a lot of care for what you do and care for the people around you.
Yeah. I guess that's sort of my brand, isn't it? Before anybody starts thinking I'm, just very wishy-washy, let's put on the Heisenberg hat.
I think could be a bit of a trademark, a nice way to market yourself. Speaking of
Okay.
marketing, you got a book coming out. Before you tell me a bit about the book, Training Zen, I've always been on the fence for a book. So I thought, are books still a thing? Do people still, isn't that really something cheesy people did so many years ago? Isn't it better to just create video content or start a podcast? Should I even do a book? Is that still a thing for you?
So the leadership book is still, it's mothballed. And basically I thought, well, I was mentoring a lot of people in my field on, evidence-based, but really about how to get your head right and how to, the practices that you need to follow in order to be successful as a trainer. Though the people I was mentoring kept saying, you need to write this down. You need to share it. You need to get out in the world. So for me, it wasn't about marketing myself at all. But it's turned out to really be a feather in my cap, because I worked on this thing for like 5 years. I've had 100 beta readers. I've never been satisfied. I'm not I'm more of a gardener, Japanese style gardener when it comes to writing. I'm not a manufacturer. I don't just get it out. I don't just ship it, with apologies to Seth Godin, just ship it. Right. Yeah. It's not my style at all. If I'm going to put something out into the world, it has to be well crafted. What really pushed me to finish all of this was not a desire. It was not any of that. I want to be published. I want my name out there. I want to market myself. It was that a dear friend of mine asked me to help him write a book, and then decided that he didn't want to write that book. He was busy with other things, and said, but don't you have a couple of books? I said, yes. And he said, let me introduce you to my publisher at, drum roll, please. This is pretty exciting. Taylor and Francis, high-end publishers in academic publishing, the professional category. And so soup to nuts, handbooks, how to, it tends to be, more evidence-based stuff, not the 70-year-old person who's retired and wants to write their life story about what a great leader they were. It has to be, the memoir, right? Yeah. So I got this proposal accepted. We're going to launch early next year. Yeah, it's in production right now. And in fact, I just got I've forgotten all the nomenclature now, but I just got the marked up manuscript last night, and I've got to go through that now.
That's an exciting thing to look forward to, in 5 years in the making. Somebody said the other day, but with ChatGPT, it can do it within a couple of days. I'm sure creating something isn't hard. Creating something meaningful that lasts is a different game. Would you agree with that statement?
I do. And honestly, ChatGPT and Cloud and all that, I experimented with them a little bit, and I found them to be very low value in actually writing. If you're going to write something the way that I wanted to write it, it has to come from you. And what it's really good at is finding, typos or, redundancies in chapter by chapter. But in terms of actually helping you write, no, I just basically, I said, don't ever rewrite anything I've written. Point out anything that seems vague, or I used AI to at the end just to do one of the quality checks that I did. Yeah. For anybody who's thinking about possibly you working with a publisher, in my experience, it's better if you have a friend who has some cachet with them already, and then your book proposal is going to take you. It took me 40 hours, 40. I mean, these are businesses. They exist to make money. They're not charities. So you have to be really, you have to have your stuff together, know exactly the positioning, know how your book compares to other similar books. You have to have it all worked out. But doing that makes your book a lot better, I think. I wouldn't be able to do any of that if I had decided to self-publish. And self-publishing, who has the time, to market that book properly and do all of the work? I'm not a fan of it so far.
Maybe we'll have somebody on soon that says, no, do self-publishing. They'll give their reasons. All right, are you ready for the lightning round? You've had a sip of water.
Yep.
The lightning round.
What is one thing you wished every facilitator or trainer would stop doing?
Putting themselves before their learners.
What is something you've learned from living in Taiwan that has shaped the way you work?
Understanding the value of connecting with people on a human level.
What's the most underrated skill for working solo?
The wisdom to not try to do the things that you suck at yourself.
What is one book that completely changed the way you do things?
All of the Stoic writing, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, it helped me understand how to thrive in this world, in any world, thrive as a human being. And it reaffirmed my inclination to work on myself as a way to build a meaningful life.
How do you start your client sessions, whether it's a workshop or a coaching session?
Oh, it's different. Coaching sessions depends on the style of the client, but I normally will do, how are things going lately, because I want to know if there's anything really urgent or anything on their minds that will prevent them from going, with our original plan, and that sometimes happens. In holistic workshops, I believe in the hot opening. So the hot opening will immediately engage them within 30 seconds. And within about 5 to 10 minutes, we need to be producing clear value. So that's a hot opening for me. And there's about 50 ways to do that.
If we were to call Savannah right now, Savannah's your youngest one, say, what does your dad do? What would she say?
Oh, she knows now. About 3 or 4 months ago, she was peeking at my LinkedIn. And I said, why? And she said, because I don't know what you do. So I said, well, did you figure it out? And she said, kind of. I think basically you talk a lot for a living. Is that right, Dad? Pretty much.
If you weren't a trainer facilitator now, what would you be doing?
I think the age where I could be a professional belly dancer is probably past in my case. No, I think probably I would be, if I wasn't training and coaching, I would be on the faculty at an MBA program. And in fact, that's part of my next phase, is I'll be doing that kind of work.
What's the weirdest client request you've ever gotten?
Well, it was a request that I rejected. It was, we want you to come in and train everybody on the sales team. And so that if they don't follow everything that you train them on, we have a good reason to fire them. And I said, well, understood. I am not an executioner or an assassin. I'm somebody who supports other people's learning and self-development. So no, thank you.
Politely declined.
Yep.
Last one, fill in the blank. Working for yourself is?
Joyous and meaningful.
Joyous and meaningful. Lovely. Where can people find you?
Company website is true-development. The dash is important. True-development.com. You can also sign up for our occasional newsletter there. I do have a Substack that if for anyone interested in learning and development or training, you're absolutely welcome. It's called Training Zen, after my book.
Which is also the name of your book, which is going to come out next year.
Well, they're conservative when they promise you a date. So the latest would be March, but they've been moving really quickly. I think probably more like January or February. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
Wonderful. That's pretty soon. I will make sure to leave all the links in the show notes so you can look up True and his wonderful work. True, thank you so much. It's truly been an honor and a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, my friend.
So I want to say a huge thanks to True Black for being part of this conversation. By the way, his real name is Truett, Truett. I had never heard of the name. He's my favorite Truett Black in the world. Make sure you go connect with him. I'll leave some links in the show notes below. If you like topics like these, if maybe you yourself are on this solo journey, know that I've got a newsletter called The Solo Sauce as well. So you can sign up over there. I'll leave a link in the show notes below. All right, so here's a little thought, or maybe some questions for you. What was the thing that nudged you to go do your own thing? Was there anything that happened? Somebody say something? Did you get to at what point did you take that step? And if you haven't done this, if you're not on your own solo journey yet, but you're thinking about it, what would it take for you to take that next step? Make it a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode.